original source who express them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com.
You're back with Dave and Mecky's Shiny Side Out on Revolution Radio, the #1 listener-supported talk radio on the net. So push the donate button and subscribe to the archives. They're free, by the way. Get yourself some great merchandise from the station's website, a t-shirt, a mug, or anything you like. Thanks for listening to Revolution Radio and certainly inviting us into your lives. We are halfway through show number 695. And we're talking about today human-animal hybrids. This is part 6. We did this show quite some time ago, back when we're doing show number 695, back 545. So 150 shows ago, we were doing it, and 150, yeah. Yeah, that's right. So, without further ado, I'll get straight into the show notes. In the past 5 other shows, we've gone through a lot of data. So, you should find our shows on Spotify, on YouTube, on Rumble, Instagram, and X, I think. I might have missed one. Doesn't matter. Go anywhere. Whatever floats your boat. Use that platform. Do message us because we'd like to hear your opinion. We'd like to respond to you. If you have a question, we'll answer it. If you have anything you might want us to research in the future, do just let us know. It's not awful. It's an easy process. Just message us. And if you want to talk to us while we're on air, you can go to the station's website, revolution.radio, and then hit the chat room button. And then you'll go to, I think it's still Element, that link takes you to. And I can talk to you. You can message us. I can read out your comments as we go along. How's that? I think that's pretty much all said. And I can see Unforsaken, myself, Narara, Jim Jones, Lavender Streams. It's a bunch of conversations going on there between them. And so that's good. So I'm going to start now. And if you capture one of our reels, watch it all the way through. And do try and share it or comment. That'd be fantastic also. I know I said it before, but I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to say it again and again. We've been getting like 30,000 views more now than we ever have. Let's see that go up. Let's try and hit, in YouTube at least, let's try and crack get back to monetization again. See if we can crack it. All right. Now, the new Japanese regulation on human, non-human chimeras. Should we worry? This story comes from October 2020. And let me see what else. GBRA assisted reproduction. It looks like it's one of the CIA released documents from the University of Coimbra. Vera Raposo is the author. The abstract of this paper is as follows. In March 2019, Japan modified its norms regarding research with human, non-human chimeras. The amended rules allow the creation of chimeras with human brain cells and the subsequent transfer of the resulting creature to a uterus where it can develop for more than 14 days, eventually until term. At this moment, the real consequences of this new regulation in actual research are still uncertain. However, many concerning issues have already been identified. This paper will start by addressing traditional topics involving this practice: the use of non-human animals in research, the use of human stem cells in scientific experimentation, and the creation of human/non-human chimeras. Subsequently, it will analyse the new concerning issues brought on by the 2019 amendment, the use of human brain cells, the transfer of chimera to a uterus, and its development for more than 14 days, and the possibility of using animals which present close similarities with humans. In the end, the paper will conclude that in spite of the legal and ethical hazards that this new regulation might carry, it should be allowed under strict scrutiny. Let's start with number 3. Problematic issues raised by the new Japanese regulation. 3.1. The specific type of human cells used. The 2019 amendment came to allow the use of human brain cells to generate HNH chimeras, human non-human chimeras, eliminating the existing ban. This is not the first concerning incident in this regard. For instance, a study performed in the University of Rochester and reported in a 2013 paper, Han et al., 2013, was able to create mice with human glial cells, that is, thinking cells, in their brains. Test results showed that the chimeric mice were much smarter than their peers. In the first half of 2019, a Chinese study involving HNH chimeras created with brain cells was made public. Wow, in 2019. The study involved the implantation of the human MCPH1 gene, a very relevant element for brain development, whose mutation results in microencephaly in 11 rhesus monkeys. The results showed that the brains of these chimeric monkeys presented some features similar to human brains in their development. For instance, better short-term memory and a longer time to develop, just like humans. The main peril is the creation of animals with human brain functions and the hypothetic consequences this feature may have on animal behavior. In particular, the question is whether the introduction of human brain cells into the human brain would grant them capacities considered exclusive human attributes. Accordingly, the British Academy of Medical Sciences concluded that the transplantation of humans' brain cells into animals in such a way that they adopt a human-like behavior. We still lack the answers for some basic scientific questions. For instance, how many human brain cells would be necessary for an animal to develop human behaviors, and what kind of behaviors would those be? In the Rochester study quoted above, researchers argued that there was nothing particularly human about these mice with human glial cells in their brains. This does not provide the animals with, quote, this does not provide the animals with additional capabilities that could in any way be ascribed to or perceived as specifically human. Rather, the human cells are simply improving the efficiency of the mouse's own neural networks. It's still a mouse. End quote. We also ignore whether there is a specific moment in time when human brain cells must be introduced into non-human embryos in order to achieve particular cognitive skills. The moment in which the human cells are introduced into the non-human being is crucial for this subsequent development of the chimera. If it happens postnatally, the transferred cells will not substantially modify the animal structure. In contrast, if it happens during the fetal stage, and especially during the embryonic stage, the human cells will have the power to substantially shape the genomics of the animal. But we still ignore if particular consequences are connected with specific lapses of time. At this stage, we know that the introduction of human neural stem cells changes the brain of non-human animals. But it is still unknown whether this is sufficient to make them develop the same skills as humans in what regards reasoning and self-consciousness takes place. Some years ago, the British Academy of Medical Sciences stated that, quote, merely demonstrating quantitative enhancement of one aspect of an animal's cognitive function does not imply its cognitive capacity is approaching that of the human, end quote. Likewise, in a study, Hayun, one of the scientists, I suppose, stated that no matter how developed the non-human chimera's brain could become, it will never reach the level of self-consciousness characteristics of humans, quote, as it takes several years to develop that in infants' brains that are 100% human and only under the right social and nurturing conditions of child rearing, unquote. Hayun qualifies as anthropocentric arrogance the belief that the mere existence of human cells or brain cells into a non-human brain could magically make the animal human or quasi-human, even if higher cognitive capacities are not enough to require these enhanced chimeras to be treated as humans. They might still be able to change the moral status of these entities, and thus also its legal status. Good question. If the resulting chimera is considered human because indeed it has human cells, or even if it is merely granted a higher status than one provided for non-human animals, the grounds, content, and purpose of research involving these creatures will have to be reassessed. In particular, a proper ethical and legal base for its elimination at the end of the research will be required. In the past, animals used in research were euthanized, but currently some of them, namely chimpanzees, are still sent to sanctuaries to live out the rest of their lives. Ultimately, it might involve the recognition of dignity and some sort of legal rights to the chimera. 3.2. The transfer of the resulting chimera into a uterus and its development after the 14th day. The transfer of the resulting chimera into the uterus of an animal is a particularly problematic feature of the Japanese regulation. The transfer of the chimeric being would not be so problematic if there were a temporal threshold. Until the last amendment, the Japanese regulation did not allow the chimeric embryo to develop for more than 14 days, which corresponds to a rule commonly accepted worldwide. This 14-day rule derives from the Warnock report that forbids research on human embryos after the 14th day of existence. Under their argument that before 14 days we cannot consider it to be an individual because the primitive streak is not yet formed and an embryonic division is still possible. The two events, the 14th day and the primitive streak, happen almost simultaneously, and the 14th day is usually indicated as a decisive temporal moment precisely because of the primitive streak. Before that temporal threshold, the existing creature has no relevant moral or legal status. It is not unlawful to use it in destructive scientific, according to the British Academy of Medical Sciences, 2011, page 9, by the way. Non-human non-human chimeric embryos should not be allowed to develop beyond 14 days of the development or the first signs of primitive streak development, whichever occurs first, unless there is persuasive evidence that the fate of the implanted human cells will not lead to sensitive phenotypic changes in the developing fetus. Now we have some bold text here, which would be Mecky's point. It says the revised Japanese regulation admits the development of the chimera after the 14th day limit in order to allow organs to develop, and eventually it might be brought to term. However, we do not know whether and how this chimeric embryo will develop. The transfer of the resulting chimera into an animal uterus and its eventual birth should not be totally banned, but it can be allowed, having in consideration the relevance of the aim, which in turn should be an aim of relevant importance, not achievable by other means. So only for a specific task that can't be achieved otherwise. I'm going to copy and paste that. Let me say copy hyperlink. I'm going to paste that. For those in the chat room, you get to see the origin of that paper, and it's a PDF. The next story we have comes from it's a news item, 15th of April 2021, and the heading is First Monkey Human Embryos Reignite Debate Over Hybrid Animals. And the subheading is the chimeras lived up to 19 days, but some scientists questioned the need for such research. This was written by Nidhi Subaraman. There you go, that's the right word. Whew. Scientists have successfully grown monkey embryos. I'll read that again. I'll fix it in post. Scientists have successfully grown monkey embryos containing human cells for the first time. The latest milestone in a rapidly advancing field that has drawn ethical questions. In the work published on the 15th of April in Cell, that's the paper, the team injected monkey embryos with human stem cells and watched them develop. They observed human and monkey cells divide and grow together in a dish, with at least 3 embryos surviving to 19 days after fertilization. The overall message is that every embryo contained human cells that proliferate and differentiate to a different extent, says Juan Carlos is Belmonte, a developmental biologist at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies in La Jolla, California, and one of the researchers who led the work. Researchers hope that some human-animal hybrids, known as chimeras, could provide better models in which to test drugs and be used to grow human organs for transplants. Members of this research team were the first to show in 2019 that they could grow monkey embryos in a dish for up to 20 days after fertilization. In 2017, they reported a series of other hybrids: pig embryos grown with human cells, cow embryos grown with human cells, and rat embryos grown with mouse cells. But the latest work has divided developmental biologists. Some question the need for such experiments using closely related primates. These animals are not likely to be used as model animals in the way that mice and rodents are. Non-human primates are protected by stricter research ethics, the rules, than are rodents, and they worry such work is likely to stoke public opposition. Here's a beautiful quote here, and it's, "There are more sensible experiments in this area of chimeras as a source of organs and tissues," says Alfonso Martinez Arias, a developmental biologist at Pompeu Fabra University in Barcelona, Spain. Experiments with livestock animals, such as pigs and cows, are more promising and do not risk challenging ethics, he says. There is a whole field of organoids which can hopefully do away with animal research. And now we're on to in the story, the touchy subject. Izpesua Belmonte says that the team does not intend to implant any hybrid embryos into monkeys. Rather, the goal is to better understand how cells of different species communicate with each other in the embryo during its early growth phase. Attempts at growing human mouse hybrids are still preliminary, and chimeras need to be more effective and healthier before they can be useful. Scientists suspect that such hybrids might have trouble thriving because the two species are evolutionarily distant. So, the cells communicate through different means, but observing cellular crosstalk in monkey-human embryo chimeras, which involve two more closely related species, could suggest ways to improve the viability of human or future human mouse models, Ipsumia Belmonte says. In the study, researchers fertilized egg extracted from cynomolgus monkeys, or Maca fascicularis, and grew them in culture. 6 days after fertilization, the team injected 132 embryos with human extended pluripotent stem cells, which can grow into a range of cell types inside and outside an embryo. The embryos each developed a unique combination of human and monkey cells and deteriorated at varying rates. 11 days after fertilization, 91 were alive. This dropped to 12 embryos at day 17 and only 3 at day 9. Quote, "This paper is a dramatic demonstration of the ability of human pluripotent stem cells to be incorporated into the embryos of cynomolgus monkey when introduced into the monkey's blastocysts, says Magdalena Zanika Goetz, a developmental biologist at the California Institute of Technology in Pasadena. She noted that this team, like others in the past, was not able to control which cells developed into which tissues. A key step, she says, to master before such models can be used. Martinez Arias was not convinced by the results. Quote, I expect better evidence, unquote, especially of the later stages of development. He says that embryo numbers rapidly plummeted as they approached day 15 of development, suggest to him, quote, that the things are very sick, end quote. Combining human cells with closely related primate embryos prompts questions about the status and identity of the resulting hybrids. Some people may see that you're creating morally ambiguous entities there, says Insoo Hyun, a bioethicist at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. He says his team was thorough in following existing guidelines. Quoting, I think they did quite a bit of due care to be mindful of regulation and ethical issues, unquote. Quite a bit isn't thorough. Research restrictions. Meanwhile, international guidelines are catching up to the field's advances. Next month, the International Society of Stem Cell Research, ISSCR, is expected to publish revised guidelines for stem cell research. These will address non-human primate and human chimeras, says Hyun. Who is leading the ISSCR committee discussing chimeras? That group's guidelines currently prohibit researchers from letting human-animal chimeras mate. Also, the group recommends additional oversight when human cells could integrate with an animal's host's developing central nervous system. Many countries, including the United States, the United Kingdom, and Japan, have at points limited research in chimeras involving human cells. Japan lifted its ban on experiments with animal embryos containing human cells in 2019 and began funding such work that year. That's how quick it is. In 2015, the US National Institute of Health, NIH, announced a moratorium on federal funding for studies in which human cells would be injected into animal embryos. In 2016, the very next year, the funding agency proposed lifting the ban but restricted research to hybrids created after gastrulation, when the early nervous system begins to form. More than 4 years later, the funding ban is still in place. An NIH spokesperson says the agency is awaiting the May ISSCR update, quote, to ensure our position reflects the input from the community, end quote, but did not provide a timeline for release of the agency's rules. That's really funny because who was asked about that? What community? Must be the scientific community has been invited to respond. Because it wasn't you and me, I'll tell you that much. Now that's come to the end of the show notes. Right at 5:32. 5:31. But I'd like to make this point. In history, the chimeras that are known to us because of petroglyphs, because of writings Egypt for that matter. The Anunnaki and the tales of us being created from basically the hominid of the time and made to look like them. So they kind of made themselves, but locally for the planet out of the people who already existed. Does it make sense? And it became us, yeah. Because the Yagigi, this is the Anunnaki, the Yagigi, who were their spacefaring servants or slave race, because, it's the start at the time, they complained the work was too hard. Because in space, the work isn't that hard, I'm sure. Easy. Do their washing, prepare the food, clean places, that's done. But digging all these canals, building all these buildings, it's too hard. So apparently the Anunnaki created humans. They called them the black-headed ones, but black-haired is the way we think about it. And so you've got to think about what other chimeras we've already made, what already existed. So the mule is a chimera, believe it or not. And that's a cross between a female horse and a male donkey. And a mule can't replicate. It can't replicate. A hinny is a cross between a female donkey and a male horse. A mule and hinny are examples of reciprocal hybrids. The Zedonk or Zonki, a zebra-donkey cross. There's a Zorse, which is a zebra-horse cross. This is one of my favorites. The Zoni or Zetland. I've actually ridden on a Zetland pony, which is a zebra pony cross. A Zoni is a generic term. Zetland is specifically a hybrid of the Shetland pony breed with a zebra. Isn't that cool? There's a Zo, a Zo or Yakao, which is a cross between a domestic cow / bull and a yak. If you didn't know that existed, well, it's a thing. There's a Beefalo, which is a cross of an American bison and a domestic cow. This is a fertile breed. This, along with the mitochondrial DNA evidence, has led bison to occasionally be classified as the genus Bos, like a Bos, B-O-S. A Zubron, a hybrid between a Wisent, which is the European bison, and their domestic cow. We have a Yakalo. That's the hybrid between a bison and a yak. It's pretty crazy, I'll tell you. I was going to say something, but I can't say it on air. The Wolfen, a fertile but very rare cross between a false killer whale and a bottlenose dolphin. One of those would have had some distress through that procedure. The Ligers and Tigons. These are crosses between a lion and a tiger, and a Panthera hybrid such as a Lidjagullup. Never heard of that one before. Hybrid orangutan, a hybrid between a Bornean orangutan and a Sumatran orangutan. Some living Homo sapiens have genes from the extinct Homo neanderthalensis, indicating a hybridization in the past. Now, we did talk about this at length because not all humans, but the most have an ancestry that includes all of the ancient DNA. So not only Neanderthals, Florensis, and there's a whole bunch of them that I can't remember offhand. They're the two that I remember. But we have that DNA, which means we all existed at the same time. If you have a family tree that, like an evolutionary tree, you won't have that kind of DNA historically in your mitochondrial DNA. But yeah, we do. So it means that we all of them existed at the same time. And if you were to fly around the world today and measure the heights of people, the look of people, if you look at someone from Peru or someone from Malaysia, I'm just pointing out differences. First Nation people in anywhere in the world, and Meki looks like he's joining us. Hurrah, Meki! I got to the end of the show notes, by the way, but you're still muted, and your video's not on yet. That's funny. So, when you go around the world and you see all different types of people, you can start to see similarities in origin, or not. So if you're driving down a road, how many of those roads to the side of you are cul-de-sacs? Meaning they appear to be individualized. So the greater part of Western society is a huge cauldron of mixed DNA. But when you find First Nations people around the world, they have a more unique to themselves look. I would suggest that look is associated with the genetic diversity. And Meki's bailed again, but he'll probably be back. Let's see what happens. And that was one of the things that I found in our huge, say, Western world genetic pool, cauldron, if you will. I've seen copies of people that I've known in other parts of the world who aren't even from the same family lines. They're exact copies. They look like clones of my friends. And where I just couldn't help it, but I would call them my friend's name, the one that I'm familiar with. Imagine the difficulty in seeing a clone of someone, but in your mind they're the other person. They look and sound the same. They might have a different accent, but that's irrelevant. We are programmed to identify people. We can't identify them upside down, and we can identify them best within our own, say, cauldron soup. Genetically, we're more capable of doing that than outside of our cauldron into another genetic pool. We're less capable of identifying or individuals within those. And I'm not being racist, just a thing. It's a thing. It's a thing. Science. I have to say that. It's a disclaimer. And I haven't even put my disclaimer up because the warning screen. There we go. Oh, that makes me feel better. I'll tell you what we do and what we don't do. Meki and I in this show and in Plato's Cave, and not just Shiny Side Out, we do read news articles and scientific papers, perform thought experiments, provide societal context on material we mention, including our own ideas and experience, discussing trends or implications, if any, and postulate agendas and implications. So we don't all, we do talk about the trends or implications, but also postulate agendas and those implications of those agendas. Yes. What we don't do is provide any financial, medical, social, or political advice. And we do not incite violence or racial action to any cause or of any kind. We are commentators commentating on the world as we see it, as it happens, as the plays occur. Historically, we can dig up material that, or or bring you new research, and that's what we do. That's what our show is based around. And those do's and don'ts, what we do, what we don't do, it's really, it's extremely important to understand the limits of our scope, because God forbid we breach any of those ideas, or we're held to account as though we have. I'm saying we haven't. We haven't broken those rules. They're our self-implied rules, self-enforced rules. And if you look and listen to what we say within the context or bounds of those rules, then it makes sense. I was making a comment to a friend of mine the other day about Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast. And how is Mr. Beast the mark of the beast? Is he the beast, or is he the Antichrist? I don't think he is. He's terribly popular and he has more money than he can throw away. But and for that, I have to say, in some way, shape or form, I'm rather jealous at his ability to have amassed such a huge fan following and financial status. I just think that's extraordinary that anyone can do that, and certainly with the power and the ideas group that he has developed, I'm astounded. What a tremendous success for that person, being able to just give away things to people. It's clearly a tax dodge, but I admire anyone that starts to give away back to society again, despite how you got there. It's irrelevant, I think. I think that the person's done a reasonable job of it's not really information though, is it? I don't know. I shouldn't be. I should be too critical. This is what our world has made. I'm wondering that Meckie's probably restarting his machine. So we'll see him next week. If it's Discord that he's having the grief with, I would expect he'll have sent me a message relating to it. Nope. I'm just going to ask him, what has happened? Because it's apparent that he's made it home, which is good news. That means he's probably alive and well. But since he couldn't turn video on and I couldn't hear him, I'm going to say that's his machine, and Discord isn't playing today. It's funny because I really don't have any problem with Discord. I use it all the time. We use it for we play games. I do a racing simulator. Oh, okay. So I do a racing simulator thing and we all talk amongst each other. Okay. So Meckie can't join us for the rest of the show, apparently. That's okay. It's all good. So yeah, I don't have any problem with Discord. I like it. I like what it is. I'm even a part of the Wi-Files Discord server group and discussions. I like what AJ does. I'm going to say yes to Meckie. He's asking if it's a good show. Yeah, it is. It's the Dave Show. Who's Meckie? Who even is Meckie? That's an old gag. There's a show called Hey Hey It's Saturday. It was started as a children's program in the 80s, early 80s. Became the backbone of Saturday night, because Hey Hey It's Saturday went from a kid show to an adult show, kind of, evening show rather than children only. And they had a band. They had Plucker Duck, Plucka, Plucker, who was outrageous. he was not the comic relief, but just, you have to see it. I'm sure that you can find examples of Hey Hey It's Saturday. Red Faces was a funny talent show where people would come on and do an act, and it was terrible usually, but they'd have to give one of them an award, like a prize for winning. So that was really funny. They would have international guest stars that would fly out and do their promo, tour, but have a spot for 15 minutes on this show, and it just couldn't believe how outrageously crazy it was. It was all live to air as well, which is always, that's death usually. Very funny. So the bands would come on and do a couple of songs and maybe be a guest or international film stars. It was very funny. Very funny show. No chimeras though. They had a puppet who was the co-star, Ozzy Osbourne, and I don't know why he wasn't an emu. He should have been an emu. If anything, he should have been an emu, because an ostrich is African, not Australia. But Ozzy Ostrich, I suppose, is nice. It's nice to say Aussie emu. We already had an emu on a kids show, and I suppose they couldn't copy the emu. Maybe that was where that came from. But they were really pushing the envelope on what could go to air and what couldn't go to air. It was a marvelous time in TV. But sadly, when the show was eventually cancelled, everyone used to have it on in the background, but we, because the people who grew up with it then became old enough to want to go out clubbing or night clubbing or whatever, or go out on Saturday night. So you'd have it running, but would you be right in front of it watching it the whole time? Not really. You would eat dinner, watch it a little bit, get dressed, come back, be on in the corner. So I think they realized that was happening and then stopped funding. But poor Daryl, he was the main host, and I watched him from being, I think, Postman Pat on the ABC or something similar to that. He was the postman on a kids show, and then he turned that into Hey Hey It's Saturday, which was a morning show for kids showing cartoons, and then that evolved into not having cartoons and being in the evening. When the show was cancelled, he was just in the habit of turning up and getting his hair and makeup done like his show was on. And eventually they politely explained that he no longer had a show, and that was, you're not allowed in the studios anymore, mate. Sorry about that. I think it was really hard for him to take, because he'd been doing it for like 30 years. It's as long as I could ever remember it being on. Sad state of affairs if you can't accept that kind of change. So, but otherwise, they released a whole bunch of DVDs and videotapes and things, and best ofs and Red Faces specials, and did like a 10-year thing where they got some people back. You could never remake it. If you had it on today, it would be so watered down. It couldn't be funny anymore, and it couldn't be what it was. They had poor John in the booth who used to put, thanks, just advised me there's 7 minutes until the bumpers. But there was a sound booth, John, I think his name was, and he would always play these funny quips and audio, like soundboard files. We know it today as a soundboard. But he'd be playing those, and they'd either be to the detriment, embarrassment, or harassment of people either on camera, off camera, or with the author of a letter, or like, it doesn't matter what it was, that they'd be constantly harassing people. I suppose it was the Australian way back then to make fun of ourselves. And by making fun of others, we were making fun of ourselves because we were the same. So we had an ability then to laugh at ourselves. I think we've lost that. To the greatest extent humanly possible, we've lost the ability to laugh at ourselves. I think the pendulum swung so far in one direction, not to One Direction the band, but away from us being able to accept humour, to humour being nearly banned on any topic, at high risk. Those who stayed with it throughout COVID, because that was when we started to become introspective and touchy about all matter of everything. But then it turned into, well, we can just throw all that nonsense away again. We can throw away you can't make jokes about people. You should be able to make jokes about people. In fact, satire is the mark of a tremendous civilization. Satire on its own is almost the nervous system within the backbone of a civilization. That's the way I see it. Comedians will gauge a crowd by saying a round of jokes, which each one has a branch to a deeper joke until they hit the point where the crowd is hesitant to laugh. And that line then becomes evident. Like putting a piece of paper on the joint between two pieces of wood, using a pencil to scribble across that joint, you easily are then able to see where that joint is. The joint between the two pieces of wood, if that makes sense to anyone listening. To you. If it makes sense to you, do comment. Say, oh yeah, no, I totally get it, because the moral standard of the audience for a comedian is determined by working out what they do and don't laugh to or about or for or because of. And that's how they find it. They find it by jumping over the moral line. Some audience might accept all some kind of crazed humour, and some might be a little bit more prim and proper. And so that moral line is different for every audience. That they'll dance over it and find where it is and make the audience think maybe a little more. But I heard one comedian talking about the art of comedy is to ask the question and answer it before the audience realizes they've got their own thoughts to answer it. So I think that's such a fantastic way of describing comedy. Something of which I wish I had that skill. I just really do. A couple of times in my life, I'd been funny in a public space where I was the focus, but it never grasped me enough to go down that path. I don't know. I was never really able to be the one who made people laugh. Someone else in the group could always make someone laugh more than I could. So we all stood back and let them be in the spotlight and allow them to have the fun and watch in awe, wishing we could all do the same thing. But guess what? This is the end of the second hour, and it'll be, unless there's something new coming to the table about human-animal hybrids, there may not be a part 7. This might be the end, but do keep your eyes peeled for our next exciting episode coming up next week. Same bat time, same bat channel, Revolution Radio, Studio A. And you'll also hear us for Plato's Cave, 7 a.m. US Eastern Time on Tuesday and Thursday. where you can catch Plato's Cave. This is Shiny Side Out. This is Dave signing out for Shiny Side Out. Don't forget, like, share, subscribe and comment. And there's the music. We'll catch you again next week. Let's hope the world stays in place for us to see you next week. Catch you then. Take care, everyone, and be safe.